Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us here. And today we are here to witness the next chapter of AI Talks, where we are getting a CEO's perspective on scaling AI. Handing over to Jeet.
Thanks, Monica. Hello, everyone. Hello, and welcome to AI Talks, the series of discussions amongst AI practitioners, hosted by AI practitioners and for AI practitioners. I am Jeet Singh, Global Business Head of AI for Tech Mahindra, and I'm joined by Hasit Trivedi, CTO Digital Technologies and Global Head of AI at TechM. Our objective with these discussions is to get you perspectives from different parts of the ecosystem of the world of AI. We're going to be discussing nuances, issues, challenges, pitfalls that may come along the way and get you some perspective on how to tackle them and how different stakeholders view these. Joining us today is Vijayanush, CFO and Sales Finance Controller for Cisco India SAARC. Welcome to the show, Vijay.
Thank you, Jeet. Pleasure joining you guys on this discussion.
Okay, so Vijay, I'll kick things off by generally asking you, and let me in fact take a step back. You are a unique guest for us because you wear multiple hats. You are no doubt a user of AI in your business function. You are also the sponsor of AI from a finance perspective. You are the man who holds the money and approves these business cases. And as we progress, you are possibly going to become one of the guardians and, for lack of a better word, governors of AI, because the whole responsible AI aspect, the governance aspect, right, from a compliance perspective, that would we see the CFO function kind of taking on that responsibility as well. So we are going to come to you with a few questions, and I'll ask you to wear different hats and change your lenses to answer those for us. But as put on your enterprise hat for us to start with, and tell us, how do you see AI adoption happening in your enterprise and in the industry as a whole?
So thanks, Jeet. Thanks, Hasit. I think it's a great pleasure talking to you guys on this specific topic. Now, for me, AI is, I think the whole early adoption phase to a large extent is ending, right? If you ask me whether there are enough organizations who have adopted, yes. If I look at some of the reports that the consultants do share, they say almost 46% of large executive-based companies are actually skilled in their AI efforts, right? Almost 26% are pretty seasoned, is what I get to understand, right? If you really look at where Cisco per se was, let's say 5 years before and where we are today, it's been a sea change. I think what from an adoption standpoint is, I think our leaders need to have a growth mindset. Managers, employees with regard to AI need to think differently. Firstly, they need to understand that the automation part of it is actually leading into a job satisfaction for them, meaning more mundane tasks are being eliminated. They're able to make suggestions on improvements. So essentially, to me, a large view of adoption is being driven by the employees themselves and people who are in the management who can't afford to fail in poor adoption, right? Technology today is the only solution. Of course, there are some challenges, like I'm seeing, especially in terms of data, be it the data quality, whether the data really that we're looking at from a decision-making standpoint is really biased or unbiased. There is also the dimensionality, right? So when you look at, let's say, machine learning as a concept, the more and more you bring these techniques into fore and you scale them, you will get more observations. And the moment the number of observations explode, the features will explode. How do you really make sense of these is what is left to the management to decide. But as long as you make algorithms which are not black box kind of stuff, I think that will push up the adoption. So two key features: get the right data and get the right employees, drive it out. I think that will be the success factor to AI adoption within the enterprise.
Yeah, and I mean, you've kind of almost stolen my next question because, like I mentioned earlier, I wanted to start getting, because I know as CFO, you're starting to think about, how do we look at explainability as a concept. So I was going to come to you and say, does this kind of really bother you? And you've kind of stolen that away. But let me bring in the CTO perspective to all of this. So from the person who approves the business cases to the person who actually builds these business cases. Hasit, as CTO, how would you like the CFO organization to look at these developments and your perspective?
I think I would say that Vijay has spoken more as a CTO now. I think I think he talked about the observation, machine learning, and more features as if like he's a data scientist. So he's taken away a lot of phrases from my answer. So I have to think really different. But I think if the most of the CFOs are like Vijay, I think we don't have to spend too much of time on creating business case. I think, as Vijay said, I think most of the companies have adopted AI, and AI being pervasive, it's a long journey. It's just adoption start is not the end. So it's a long journey. I will say it's a perpetual journey for next 10 years at least, correct? And before it becomes a steady state, yet another kind of investment. So seeing CFO should be seen as a perpetual investment kind of thing, and not being seen as a typical ROI. Okay, give me use case, give me ROI for every use cases. If everybody start looking at the use case specific ROI, then it will die a natural death. Correct? People will get tired of creating business cases. On enterprise adoption, I think people have graduated to experiment to few models in production. Most of the large enterprises has anything between 50 to 100 models in production. But certainly the scaling AI is still a challenge. Because various aspects. Of course, one is the investment, which CFO manages, and people are not able to articulate the benefit, or that people are not able to choose the right problems to solve. It is more driven by efficiency, not how this technology can be used to differentiate your business. Correct. So I think that we are still going into the lower end of the use cases where the efficiency becomes a key, and then measurement becomes very difficult because you're shaving off the bandwidth, but the FT doesn't get shaved. Right? Now it becomes very challenging from CFO perspective that if you are making case for business efficiency, I'm not seeing any reduction from the FT perspective. If you make a case of business disruption, then CFO can consider, but people are not able to make and articulate that business disruption case. So that is, I think, the technology and business owner needs to think more on those aspects. On an industry specific, consumer facing industries are doing far better job than the B2B kind of industry, I would say, because as a consumers, we are a big consumer of the AI as a technology, correct? And thus the provider of the CPG industry or any of those industries are very matured in adoption of the AI. But scaling would require the governance, as you said, that how do I ensure that I'm compliant, I'm fair, I'm doing things in ethical manner, I can explain the things. There are penalties that have been imposed on the companies of not complying to local regulation, either on data storage perspective or the GDPR kind of regulations, or the denying the rights of a consumer on certain aspect, correct? And inability to explain any of these things. So I think it's a long journey from the ROI perspective, from investment perspective, maturity of the space in which is applied, and also the governance aspect, which I think is a critical, which is still a talk itself. Right? People are talking but not doing much on the ground.
Yeah, no, thanks, Hasit. I think let me pick up a few phrases that the two of you used. So Vijay spoke about growth mindset amongst the leaders, right? Hasit talks about disruption of business models, business processes, reimagine your business. And I think both of you are also agreeing on the fact that today AI is a strategic imperative. It's not a choice, right? The phrase is AI or die. So with all of this happening, while we understand that it's important, we must do. However, as a CFO, you can't let exuberance run away. So, I will again come back to what is there are a lot of people enthusiastic about AI. There is imagining the realm of possibility, but also tempering it down from a practicality business perspective, while understanding that some of these have a long gestation period for you to see ROI. How do you reconcile all this, Vijay, and what is your kind of advice to people on how should they look at the viability of a project or the business case of that project?
Yeah, I think if you look at the whole evolution of this topic, right? It talked about what Hasit mentioned was what is the cost of doing a certain transaction. Let's say if I'm just looking at efficiency, then it's a straightforward, robotic process automation, right? I look at how I can make it more faster, how I can make it more cheaper, or even for that matter, make it more accurate, more efficient, more effective, a more better process, right? I think these two are straightforward. From a use case standpoint, it's very easy to convince anybody. So it's a well-suited time-consuming finance function, right? Look at automation, remove FTEs, and straightforward. But I think if you're going to expand it to a larger realm of how you look at AI, I think it's about a newer market you want to attract. Let's say you want to expand into a newer task. And that's where the whole thinking needs a little bit more of a circumspect, and if you can call it some sort of a sixth sense to make it more successful, right? And then you want to innovate a new business model, right? So for instance, to the point that Hasit mentioned, governance is a very key aspect. So for example, in Cisco, what we did is we used automation to actually develop a framework to identify which are the deals when we are going into transacting with multiple partners and customers across certain countries. We were seeing threats linked to, let's say, FCPA practices, or for example, corruption linked issues. So there are high risk countries and high risk deals involved. So very clearly, if AI could be used to build algorithms to identify deals which have this issue, then it was very easy, right? It's a straightforward it's a no-brainer for a CFO to go ahead and implement it. But if you're going to ask him, if I develop a particular solution, will it help actually improve the sales in a particular region, right? Within the AI, looking at how the market is going to behave, that needs growth mindset, right? That's not going to be an easy discussion for the CFO, because one, I think you have to balance out like the exuberance part of it. It's a cultural aspect, right? You have employees thinking that maybe AI will actually replace them. You have to give them kind of assurance that that's not the way it is. If you look at the future employment opportunities, that considerably going to be different from what it is today, thanks to AI. At the other end of the aspect is the data that you're looking at, right? Through this whole AI mechanism, you are enabling more decision making. So are you making sure the right data goes to the right set of people? So there are certain security constraints as well, right? So amidst all this exuberance of AI and everything coming into picture, I think certain aspects which are core to the business need to be managed. Or rather, they're easily manageable. On the other side, certain things linked to governance, linked to employee perspective, HR practices, all of these are going to come and ask the organization a set of questions which are needing a more holistic answer, and AI is not that easy from that standpoint. That's my perspective.
Absolutely, Vijay. Thanks for that. And again, can't help but point out that what you spoke about of that spectrum of saying efficiency is one end of the spectrum, automate everything, get to an efficient and effective way of doing things. And then the other spectrum is the growth mindset. I think that is exactly our brand promise. I'll point to it somewhere here, which is 0 to infinity, where we are talking about enabling that spectrum of what we are calling zero ops, and which is what you spoke about, the efficiency part of the story. And then we're also helping clients imagine and aspire for infinity ops, which is the infinite possibilities that will open up when you use AI. So, you couldn't have said it better. Thank you again for giving me the opportunity to talk about Brand Amplify. But you touched about a few aspects, right? So you spoke about governance, you spoke about the HR practice, and the kind of knock-on effects there. And that brings us to another very important kind of hot topic in this ecosystem. While explainability is one, the whole concept of reskilling, because what's going to happen is, some tasks, and you said mundane tasks will get automated. There are some tasks which will get eliminated because you've reimagined the business model, like Hasit was mentioning earlier. Now, in this, there is a fear amongst all people on, what will happen to my job and will I be made redundant? So that whole reskilling as a function and how this will open up, and I'm sure all of us as practitioners firmly believe that this will actually give better opportunities, more exciting work. But your own perspective about how organizations should go about it and how you yourselves are looking at this.
So, I mean, I want to reiterate on the recent World Economic Forum reports, right, which are actually saying AI will be a net job creator for the industry, right? So I think a 2019 report said you will have 133 million new jobs and you will eliminate 75 million old jobs. In fact, they went around actually calibrating which are those jobs, and a lot of them had finance roles, which may be something that I've been doing 20, 25 years ago, right? So they are really worrisome. But what's really happening is, if you look at the education framework that is there in many of the developing countries, if you look at the way the alignment is happening to the new jobs that are there in the industry, it's going to be difficult to match skill to skill, right? So the biggest lever that an organization has is to revise and relook at their whole workforce from an upskill standpoint. And that's a very clear validation that our enterprise are also taken, right? To see how the current existing workforce can actually look to see how they can develop a new area of work per se. So, like I said, in Cisco, what we have done is we've identified certain programs within the finance organization itself, which works on identifying what we call as the, if there is a leadership, we call them servant leader, right? So here we call them a digital programmer. So somebody who is within Cisco actually looks to be a programmer. It's fascinating, right? You're in the finance organization. Now you're looking at new processes because you own those processes. You own those processes, and then to see how to optimize it is actually a sense of larger ownership. That is the feedback that I'm getting from a lot of employees who are there. So one mindset is to think, oh, this is something that's going to take away my job. But at the same time, the organization is helping people to say there is amount of time that you will get once this job is remote. Can you focus on something else, right? Which is more meaningful, more value added. I think even if you look at the wage structures across the market, you will see that AI and related skills are the highest paying, and they are the most sought after as well, right? So there is always in olden days you had 5 people in your team, and all of them used to do multiple functions of finance. But now I have one person in the team who can write codes for me, develop reports what I need, how he can help me suggest certain, like I said, data sets that I need. So a lot of the data scientist part of the work is actually getting into finance as well. And if there is somebody who can help me identify a trend, who can help me identify that this particular transaction is going to go wrong. So we are moving ourselves from, let's say, descriptive analytics to, let's say, predictive analytics. If I'm going to say, if I can project what is my sales forecast for the next quarter or next year, depending on certain algorithms, certain customer behavior, certain market trends, then that is something that I am depending more and calling, my own team to be more upskilled on that front, how they will be able to use and generate these data points. I think that will be the future of work, if you ask me, right? And I think that is the way that the industry themselves are looking at it. Although AI is said to be something that will replace, but the plethora of work that will create is going to be a great opportunity for the entire employable youth, or the entire workforce, if you may call it.
Absolutely. I think, I keep giving the example that, and you said the old days, and I'm saying the really, really old days, prior to, the invention of the car. And they said when cars came about, people who were fitting saddles and, horseshoe repairers were out of jobs, but they got so much better, more fulfilling, and much more at-scale jobs in the automobile industry. Or prior to electricity, the gas lighters who actually went and lit lamps were out of jobs, but then electricity opened up so much more. But you've touched upon a topic I know is very close to Hasit's heart when you said 5 people to one person, and then Hasit would say, but there are 10 more digital workforce that is working with you. So Hasit, I want to come to you on one is the reskilling aspect, and also on that force multiplication of saying how you can lead to the creation of a digital workforce. So you're more empowered. Your perspective on that, please.
So I think, as Vijay said, I think the jobs will be more, correct? I think there is no dearth of the newer jobs. But the biggest challenge which any enterprise will have of reskilling of the existing workforce, correct? So that is where the core DNA of the company comes into picture. Have you created and invested over a period of time learning infrastructure, learning culture, where there is a technology infrastructure to train people, there is a content curation happening on an ongoing basis, and there is a culture to learn new things, correct? This is where within legacy companies, some companies will do better than others because of that core infrastructure, core DNA of the company is to learn new stuff. And I think that will come more and more at the front of the differentiation, because the rapid change in the job description of each of the role will be so accelerated form, it will come in shape. Very few companies will be able to adapt to this change, and the reskilling refactoring is among, apart from technology, if one area where company would need to invest and see if it's the reskilling this thing. I think they just have to open up their pockets to, if somebody wants to train, let's not worry about whether that person training will be utilized or not. I think there is a classic saying, things keeps coming, that a CFO asks a CTO that what if I train and that person quits? I'm losing a CFO ask, traditional CFO, not the VJ kind of CFO. The CTO says that what if we don't train, that person stays back? Correct. So I think that is a classic dilemma as an enterprise. I think the reskilling has to be upmost at a very high an agenda, and that is one aspect which companies need to invest across the functions. Correct. So because the problem, the challenges will be that only 5% of the job in the world are the job where the 100% automation and elimination happens. For remaining 95% of the job, there is a portion of the work gets eliminated and automated. Now, that portion of bandwidth reutilization is the key. How do you restructure your JD? How do you reorganize your workforce is critical, and how do you make it work with the digital workforce? Because over a period of time, if you have 100,000 human employee, potentially you will have 100,000 bots. Right? How do you make sure that this diverged workforce are working together for certain piece of work, and how this 100,000 becomes an assistant to the remaining 100,000 people? Correct. So today the executive assistant is given to CXOs. Correct. Now it's a luxury. Each individual can have a digital assistant, so digital workforce to do the job which they think can be done by the human workforce. So I think enablement to create digital workforce and enablement to do something new, both are very important skill which enterprise needs to adopt for and invest for.
Yeah, no, thanks, Hasit. And yeah, for sure, this CFO who talks about digital programmers is not part of your example. I love that statement, Vijay.
I think I said,
yeah, I know.
Statement was a machine learning.
Exactly. So you're the CFO that every CTO dreams of, okay?
Yes, of course.
And digital programmer is something I've taken away in my notes. It's a wonderful phrase that you.
No, but that's a cool initiative that Cisco has started off. And if you look at the retention, the point that Hasit was making, right? The retention percentage in this set of people is the highest across the core roles of finance. If you look at accounts payable, accounts receivable, which we categorize as mundane kind of work, but that's where the core set of people are staying back in the organization, and they feel very proud about it, right? They're thinking differently, how they're value adding. I think that's the crux of what Hasit was saying. So retention, at the same time, you're looking at the newer or innovative ways of doing things.
Right. No, thank you for that. Now let me again get both of these quadrants on my screen to get me some different perspectives. I want to talk to you first, Vijay, on as a CFO, you're very often faced with a build versus buy conundrum, right? And especially along AI, where things are changing so fast. By the time you build something, somebody else, a niche company, may have already built it, so you would have been better off buying it, etc., etc. How do you look at it, the build versus buy conundrum? What's your lens? How do you tackle that issue?
Okay, so I think this is a place where the CFO needs to collaborate very strongly with people like Hasit, right? Because either you depend on them or be taken away for a ride. That's the question we're asking, right?
Yeah.
Because whether you can develop it in-house or you should depend on something that is. So I think it's a good balance we need to achieve. Maybe partner with third-party AI providers and also see how we can leverage the homegrown experience, right? There are, of course, with the kind of experience that we have and the talent that's available, to the point that I was making about some of these digital programmers and stuff like that. So maybe there is a good balance that we need to achieve. If there are really stronger technologies which are very high end and require very high deep competency in AI, perhaps those are the ones that we might need to leverage from outside. But if you want somebody to focus on excavating data, break down the functional silos within the organization, so that is something that could be more internal, right? You bring out champions, overlay them on some such deep technology, and then take it for execution. I think it's, in my mind, the biggest fear is whether there is executionability, is there usefulness of this particular AI, right? So that is what we want to figure out. So the CFO is more keen to do that. We've had these experiences of trying to figure out technology, then we say, let's have a hackathon to see whether we have a talent within the company that can actually build out this use case, develop this use case for us, and then bridge the divide between what you want to achieve through, let's say, deep competency, like I said, take it from outside, build on the layer that is internal, mix them. Maybe a hybrid approach is the best way to go. But this is, I think, the fear of the finance executives as well, right? We have to resist the appeal of machine learning and these kind of technologies, saying, okay, this is extreme glamour, let's go ahead and get it done. But at the same time, the practicality aspect of it, right? It's also about whether CFOs like us are fluent enough with these kind of things. So Hasit talks to me about certain technologies. If I don't even understand it, then I might say, okay, I'm out of it. Maybe we should hire from outside or something like that. But I think a good hybrid approach, understanding of what is deep, which is needing to be hired from outside, what can be achieved from inside, layer of people who are experts, break down the functional silos across, let's say, whichever organization we are talking about, be it finance, HR, or whatever, and then implement. I think it's that would be my focus on getting this done.
Okay. Hasit, coming to you, he's obviously a CFO that you would really want. What kind of a CTO, or what's the perspective of a CTO that which helps Vijay and his team, like he said, not lose sleep and give that confidence? What's your perspective on that?
Yeah, I think Vijay covered in-house versus outside, correct? I think it's a beautifully right balance hybrid approach. I would like to give another dimension to it. That one thing we need to remember: AI is still undergoing rapid changes. It is not a technology where there is a player which are leaders, correct? It's a very fragmented supplier base, correct? So there are niche. There are hyperscalers of the world, and there are niche product vendors, and there are startup ecosystem, and the legacy world of ERPs and CRM bringing AI into that thing, correct? So we need to be cognizant of the fact that it's a journey of technology evolution and with no clear leader. So you have to be very careful while locking yourself to somebody, because who is good today may not be the best tomorrow, correct? There may be some others. So your ability to switch in and switch out the vendors or providers has to be extremely high, because this, as I repeat, there is no clear leader, and it's changing. It's changing with rapid pace. So, apart from the vendor ecosystem and your in-house, the open source is a very, very large and compelling space where I think we should be, all enterprises should source from, correct? And potentially contribute also wherever you can contribute. So I think the future proofing is a primary axis. I think we should look at whenever we are utilizing any technology, is it matured enough or not? Because AI is it's a myriad of technology, correct? So you have computer vision, NLP, within the use case, you will go multiple things. So when it comes, is it a stable and matured piece of AI? Then you can make a choice of in-house or product, whatever kind of thing. If it is not matured, then you have to design it in a manner, be it in-house or be it a solution vendor, you take it from outside. You have to ensure that you design a manner which allows you to switch in and switch out. I keep giving the example, of mutual fund. And in this context, now I have a CFO, so I'll talk something about finance. He talked a lot about technology, but let me talk about the finance this time.
Give it back
so
to
in
him.
a mutual fund, you have mechanism to see the performance of a unit, correct? So whether it's performing well or not. And if it doesn't perform, you have option to switch out and switch in, correct? Within the same vendor, correct? So I think similarly, first of all, enterprise needs to build the ability to monitor the AI performance. So future proofing with the ability to monitor performance is the first criteria whenever you design something. Then based on performance, you should be able to switch in and switch out. Your architecture should allow to switch in and switch out, like the mutual fund schemes, correct? If it is not performing well, I should be seamlessly switch out without impacting my business functions, correct? If I'm using AI for delinquency management or working capital management or a payable management, correct? It may be any of the functions or investment advisory, but the usage should be done in a manner that if the AI performance degrades, I say move from say Google to Azure or Azure to Google, vice versa, or say data robots or data bricks of the world, or a service provider like a Tech Mahindra or anybody kind of thing. I should be able to switch in and switch out seamlessly without this thing. So that as a buyer of a technology, we should always mandate our suppliers, be it, it can be hyperscaler, it can be any other product companies or SIs like ours. Right? I think the design principle should be ensured to switch in and switch out. But sometimes it becomes costly also. So again, the finance comes into picture. So finance will force you to do always trade-off calls, correct? So you have to choose it appropriately. Sometimes you need a flexibility, but it's too costly. So you have to, wherever you have to take your bet and take some risk mitigation, calculated risk. But this element has to be kept in mind that it's evolving technology and there is no clear leader.
Thanks, Hasit. I think that was another beautiful analogy of switch in and switch out of mutual funds. I think that's another. And I just want to add, nowadays on TV, you see a lot of ads which say mutual fund sahi hai. I think we should, we should adopt an AI sahi hai kind of approach. But on that note, we're completely out of time. But Vijay, thank you so much for taking time out and speaking to us and for sharing your views. As you can make out from our faces, we're and like Hasit said, you're the CFO that all practitioners dream of. So stay that way, and we look forward to hearing more from you and more from CFOs like you. May your tribe increase. Again, on behalf of the team here at TechM, thank you so much for taking our time. It was an absolute pleasure and privilege to host you.
Thank you so much, Jeet. Thank you, Hasit. It's been great connecting with your team, and it always helps, right? In the sense when you connect with people who speak technology, and if you make sense of what you're saying, and it's highly appreciated, it gets a good feeling for yourself. You get feel very good about it. So thanks so much, Jeet, Monica, Hasit, everyone else. We'll stay connected. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.